Hello BookTube. Today I'm going to be doing the What's Your Poetry tag. This tag was created by Matt Wall, Paperback Junkie, and I'll leave a link to his original video in the show notes down below. Before I begin though, I do want to address my relationship with poetry as a sort of an introduction. I like poetry. I'm not that great at really reading it critically. And for a number of years, my poetry collection was extremely paltry. I think I had maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 volumes of poetry that since expanded significantly in the past few years, and I've been really enjoying a lot of the poetry that I've been reading, but it's still perpetually paltry. So anyway, with that out of the way, let's get going with the questions. Question number 1. Do you prefer metaphor or simile? I think I prefer metaphor. I'm not particularly fond of that comparison that you get in simile. Question number 2. What is the most important element in a poem for you? Form, structure, meaning, feeling, sound, alliteration, assonance, consonance, etc. And you can't say them all. I think I prefer form and structure. But I'm also rather fond of the sound. Although, since a lot of the poetry I read is rather contemporary, a lot of that, like alliteration, consonance, rhyme, aren't necessarily there. So I'm going to go with form and structure as my favorite aspects of poetry. Although again, since a lot of what I read is contemporary, there's not much of like that formalized structure. Question number 3. What is your favorite school movement in poetry? I'm going to go with the confessionals, because I get the sense that the confessional poets and confessional poetry have become, by and large, the dominant poetic school. That pretty much most poets working today are confessional poets. Although I do also have some fondness for Ginsberg and the Beats, and some formalists, but again, my poetry collection is rather paltry, and most of what I have are contemporary poets, which I'll work on sort of expanding out here soon, hopefully. Question number 4. Since we see the world through a poet's eyes, does a poet have to live an interesting life for you to like their poetry? No. Most of the poets I enjoy are academics. They either teach poetry writing or literature classes, and their lives are probably fairly mundane. But yeah, so I don't think a poet needs to have an interesting life to write interesting poetry. Although sometimes that can be a bonus. But I mean, it's more skill in writing than in actual lived experience, I think. Question number 5. How does geography play into the poets you like, or does it at all? It doesn't at all. The poets I like, or that I've collected, live all over the United States, and one of my favorite poets, Wisława Szymborska, was Polish. Question number 6. Whitman said, "To have great poets, there must be great audiences." Bukowski said, "To have great audiences, you need great poets." Matt Wall says, Unless you have great places for these two to meet, it doesn't matter. What's your take? I mean, in a way, I think all three have their points. I mean, particularly like contemporary poetry, poetry has been in a sustained doldrum, for decades now. Despite sustained efforts to correct it, poetry is nowhere near as popular as it once was. So in a way, you do need you do need the audiences. You do need good poets. And I think you need like books and, of course, reading places or watching places to engage with them. So I'll go with all of the above for this one. Question number 7. Who do you think has advanced poetry the most? I would go with William Carlos Williams, because I think within the context of American poetry, most poets working today and most poets who've been working for decades now, if not nearly a century, owe a huge amount to William Carlos Williams' work. And he's one of my favorite poets, even though I don't have any of his work in my collection at the moment. Something I do want to correct, but for the moment, definitely I would say William Carlos Williams. Question number 8. Since the rise of the moderns and free-form verse over the last 50 years and more, currently the rise of instapoetry, what movements of poetry do you think the future holds? I don't know. I'm not as up to date on current trends in poetry, even though most of what I read are contemporary academic poets. So I don't know what future movements there will be. And it's always hard to prognosticate. I mean, any answer is almost certainly going to be wrong, because some trends can be flashes in the pan, some trends can last for decades. It's a crapshoot. So, anyway, that was the what is your poetry tag? No, yeah, sorry about that. What's your poetry tag? So if you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged, and I will see you tomorrow with a weekly read. So until then, BookTube, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.